If you are not asserting your boundaries, someone else is. Hello, welcome back to this channel where we talk about all things healing anxious attachment so that you can have a secure attachment and not an anxious attachment. And today we're going to talk about boundaries, because boundaries and having good, healthy boundaries actually can feel really good. They change your life, they make you feel more connected to yourself, and they actually make your relationships better. And I know you might have all sorts of stories about boundaries being scary or hard, or you feel like if you set a boundary, you're going to come across as defensive or too sensitive, and it's just not like that. When you really understand what a boundary is and how to communicate it in a loving way, you are going to be freed from any stress about boundaries. So, healthy boundaries are the difference between acting from fear, compromising our values, feeling insecure, ignoring our preferences, tolerating things that don't feel good in our body, harboring resentment, and having healthy boundaries means feeling clear with your energy, getting your needs met in a healthy way, feeling connected to your body, having the ability to stay in alignment, feeling safe in relationships, feeling able to create and deepen connections, and on a relational level, being able to attract partners who show up consistently and build dreams with these people without losing your sense of self. And so many things. Boundaries really are key. I don't know how to tell you. Maybe you are already convinced. Maybe you're like, I already clicked the title. I am already into boundaries. Let's get into it. So I think that all of the talk about boundaries, there's so much you need to have healthy boundaries and not very much breaking it down into what that means and what it means in relationship to needs and what is your responsibility and when is it someone else's responsibility. So it can feel kind of complex, but really it comes down to the fact that boundaries are like these invisible rules or lines or guidelines that we create to protect our emotional space and our mental space and our physical space and our physical body. So imagine a boundary like a fence around your yard. And the fence says, this is my space, and I decide what feels comfortable here. So what would happen if there was no fence? This is when we're talking about leaky boundaries. What would happen? Well, maybe deer would just come in and they would eat the garden. Or you would actually feel kind of unsafe because anyone can kind of just stroll into your yard at any time, which would feel unpredictable. People might throw garbage in your yard. Maybe someone drives their truck in your yard. Maybe someone decides to park their vehicle in your yard because there's no fence. And none of that feels good. It feels unsafe for the body. But it might feel like, oh, I owe this to the neighbors and the deers need to eat too. And that's the people-pleasing tone coming in. And let's think about the opposite. What if the fence is too big? It's like 40 feet high. Maybe there's even a ceiling. It's like brick. You can't even see through it. Then what would happen? This is our rigid boundaries. You can't really see what's going on. Sunlight is blocked, which doesn't feel very good. You probably feel very disconnected from the world, but you might feel contained, which has a sense of safety, but it also feels isolating. So when we create healthy boundaries, we want a fence that is clear, but still permeable, where it's like a chain link fence, but prettier. So there's airflow, you can see what's going on, but it's clear where your boundaries are. So boundaries are knowing what feels good and what doesn't in terms of our interactions with others and in terms of how we treat ourselves. So it's okay to tell people they're getting too close or they're crossing a line that feels uncomfortable. These things are for your containment, your safety, and for you to thrive. Setting a boundary doesn't mean shutting people out necessarily. It means protecting yourself so that you can be your best self in life and relationships. And ultimately, good boundaries are going to make relationships stronger because they bring clarity, they show respect for the other and respect for yourself, and everyone feels good when they have that sort of knowing and understanding of each other. So when it comes to uncovering, understanding, clarifying, loving your own boundaries, the question about needs is completely intertwined. And I also realize that the question about values is also intertwined. So we can think about needs as essential parts of our well-being. This is what we need to thrive, not just survive. That's food, shelter, water, that's survival. Your needs are what you need to thrive, and you are allowed to have those things. That can be feeling healthy, feeling fulfilled, wanting respect, sleep, personal space. Needs are what really fills us up and keeps us balanced. and they come from within. It's about you. It doesn't matter what someone else's needs are. It's about what you need. Boundaries, on the other hand, are sort of the actions or the limits that we set up in order to protect those needs. It's the structure that we create so that the needs get met, which might be booking fitness classes or booking a massage. It's the external expression through words and actions of what we are comfortable with and what allows us to honor those needs. For example, if your need is personal time alone to recharge, then the boundary is going to be scheduling that in and communicating that with people if they ask you for something that would actually impose on that boundary and getting that need met. So let's say you decide that Tuesday nights are your self-care night and you're not doing any socializing, but then so-and-so wants you to come for dinner. That's when it's your responsibility to communicate the boundary of, I've made an agreement with myself, and as much as I'd like to come, this is also really important to me, and I know that if I break this, the rest of my week isn't going to be like in the way that I need it to. Or you decide on that week, if it's realistic for you, to move that self-care night to Monday or Wednesday, but it's about you and what's going to work for you, and not the story about what your friend might make it mean or how they might experience you not coming. So it's your responsibility to uphold the boundary. Then we also have values. Values are reflecting what really matters to us on a deep level. That can be honesty, health, respect, compassion, growth. They are the why behind our choices for our needs and our boundaries. So our needs definitely stem from our values. If you deeply value personal growth, for instance, then you might have a need for alone time to pursue that learning. If you value connection, then you probably have a need to have meaningful interactions with others. And your boundary is the structure that you create and the way that you communicate in order to make sure all of that lines up. So let's talk about boundaries, needs, and values specifically for women with anxious attachment. Weak boundaries are more common, leaky boundaries are more common, and they can show up in subtle ways, especially because we tend to be very focused on keeping connections and keeping people pleased and happy, and sometimes that overrides our own needs and values because we're trying to avoid potential rejection. And so there's a bit of an illusion where if things are going smoothly or well, then the experience that we're having should be right, even if it doesn't actually feel good for us. Some ways that people with anxious attachment override their own boundaries could be over accommodating to please others, so saying yes to things you don't want to do, agreeing to last minute plans, staying on the phone longer than you want to, taking on extra tasks at work even when it stresses you out, even when it goes against what you actually want. This is likely stemming from a fear of disappointing others or being seen as difficult. So it makes sense. Our leaky boundaries always make sense, but they're not always for your highest good. Another example would be not expressing when you feel hurt or upset. So instead of voicing your feelings when you're hurt, you might ignore that discomfort. You might try and brush it off. You might say, oh, I'm actually fine, for the sake of keeping the peace. For example, if you have a friend that shows up late repeatedly, cancels plans last minute repeatedly, that might feel disappointing to you, but you don't address it because you are afraid that it might come across as needy or create a conflict. This is a leaky boundary. Third example would be allowing or tolerating relationship behaviors that don't feel respectful for you. This would be a leaky boundary. So tolerating things like inconsistent communication, unclear commitment, like this hot and cold thing. You might convince yourself that it's normal and that it's okay because you don't want to lose the connection. And that fear overrides the discomfort of the behavior and how shitty that feels, which leads you to kind of accept this treatment that doesn't actually align with your values and your needs. Another example would be sacrificing your time and energy. Another example could be going along with relationships at the pace of other people instead of your own needs. So you might tend to kind of collapse into whatever their pace is, whether that is too slow or too fast. So for instance, you might hold back from talking about plans about the future or exclusivity because you are afraid it's going to seem clingy or push that person away, even though that's actually the pace that you want to operate at. Final example I'll give you would be staying silent to avoid discomfort. So if something in the relationship feels off and you have a tendency to hesitate to bring it up, or you convince yourself that you're overreacting or it's too much, this equates to not asking for clarification, feeling insecure. Then you're probably trying to do it again to avoid seeming needy, but it just leaves you feeling really anxious and unsure. And that is a leaky boundary. You're not actually protecting yourself by communicating what you need. So it's really necessary to actually create better dynamics to be able to name the truth of all these different things that you're feeling. It doesn't mean that you are making it someone else's problem or that they have to fix it, but you're at least naming what you need and taking that responsibility. So let's go back to those examples and then look at them from terms of like healthy boundaries and values and needs. So one of the examples I gave you that tends to show up for anxious attachers is tolerating disrespectful behavior like inconsistent communication or being left unread. This tends to be very activating for people with an anxious system. Probably the reason that it feels bad is because you value respect and consistency. It is a healthy value to want to be treated with kindness and reliability and consistency, and this is likely going to be extra important to someone who has anxious attachment tendencies because it just feels really good for our system to have that consistency. So there could be a value of authentic communication. So you like meaningful, reciprocal relationships where you feel seen and you feel important, and that's okay. Because we have this value, of course, we're going to feel sensitive to anything that is inconsistent or dismissive because it makes us feel devalued or deprioritized. So the unmet values here are respect and consistency and, let's say, authentic connection. The needs that also aren't being met in this situation when we have a leaky boundary around it are or would be emotional security. In order to feel grounded, it's okay to need consistency and even some reassurance in your relationships, especially when you're feeling anxious about the connection. There's no rule about not needing reassurance. It just depends where that need from reassurance is coming from. Is it coming from a sense of urgency and lack and panic and I need you to make me feel better? Yes, that's the opportunity for you to cultivate some deeper self-soothing techniques, and wanting clarity and direction and consistency are also healthy needs. So if there's a lack of boundary around this, it's probably not expressing feeling uncomfortable with the inconsistent communication. Instead, you're maybe rationalizing it or tolerating it. And the opportunity for you to set a healthy boundary is to honor how that makes you feel by having an honest conversation with this person and saying, consistent communication is really important to me because it helps me feel secure. And I'd appreciate if we can make an effort to stay more connected, even if it's just a quick text when you're busy. That is the healthy, beautiful, loving request. It's not shaming the other person. It doesn't have to come from a place of anger because you actually brought it up before it created this whole resentment thing. And if this idea of communicating like that creates some closure in your body, or like, oh my God, they would leave me if I said that, then let's circle back up to your values and ask again, is it your value to have consistency and respect and reciprocal relationship? And if this person truly would walk away based on this request because they can't do it, then potentially they're not actually the person that's ever going to align with those values anyway, and someone that you probably don't want to pursue a long-term relationship with. Let's go back to another example, which is going along with the pace of others in relationship, even if it feels too fast or too slow. Again, the reason that we're looking at this in terms of values, needs, and boundaries is to start to uncover why this doesn't feel good for you, and to validate how this might not actually be aligned with how you feel, and then give you a bit of a framework and direction in order to remedy this. So starting at the value, you are likely someone who values being true to yourself, or at least wants to feel like you are true to yourself, and wants your relationship to feel in alignment with your desires and moving in the same direction that you are. So you know that moving at your pace allows you to build relationships that feel solid and authentic. You probably also have a value of mutual respect and reciprocity. So you value relationships that feel balanced, where both partners' needs and desires are considered, and you might feel like what you are doing is playing your part by allowing the other person to progress or not progress at their own pace, but that's actually throwing the relationship out of balance, and it's not meeting your values anymore because you're just fawning to the other person's pace and will, which you might not actually know if that's what they want or if they're just assuming that's what you want. So this is why communication is just so important. So the need here, the reason that your pace feels good to your body is for security and stability. So for you to be able to feel safe as you deepen in this relationship and secure as you deepen in this relationship, you need a pace that suits your nervous system. And moving too fast or too slow can be a major trigger for anxiety and create a sense of instability if it's not aligned with what really feels right for you. And where I see this coming up a lot is women waiting for their partner to commit, but like hanging around even though they're not committing. And this can go on for months and months and months. Maybe you've been in situationships where it's like, we're kind of together, but we're kind of not. And like, is this going to lead to commitment? And you're sitting there being like, I want it to be committed. I am like seeing this person as my life partner. I'm like seeing all these things in the future, but they're inconsistent. They're like kind of hard to get a hold of. They haven't committed to me, even though your desire is to feel that commitment. And we think what we need to do is just like play it cool and let them come in at their own pace and like, not push them. And in some ways that's like the right thread. Like, we don't want to push someone, we don't want to be needy, we don't want to be demanding, but naming the truth of your desire can actually invite them closer to you. It like creates the opportunity for them to step up. If you are trying to subtly sort of like micromanage, like make sure that you're not pushing them, but you don't want them to like end it, but you want to make sure they commit, like feel how micromanagey that becomes. And it's like a lot of work for you emotionally and internally. And it also leaves them generally in this like they can get away with what they want. And when men especially generally want to feel like they have a sense of freedom. This doesn't mean they never want to commit to relationships, doesn't mean anything like that, but the more that they can not commit, a lot of the time they won't, because it's just easier. Why would anyone want to commit when they can get all the benefits of being in a relationship without actually doing that? When you're just always available and you're always sweet and you're always like emotionally supportive of them or whatever it is, because you're probably giving, why would they want to commit? So it's up to you to name these needs and this desire to be in a committed relationship. And I know that's a scary thing to do because it creates a point of decision. And we are avoiding that because we don't want the decision to go in the direction that we don't want it to. But then we're just avoiding reality a little bit. So instead what we do is we have this very leaky boundary of kind of like, come and go when you want, or like, I will meet your pace even though it doesn't feel good or safe for me. And it could also be the other way, where it sounds like, hey, I really want to take things slow and build a solid foundation in this relationship. Or on the other side, hey, I really want to explore exclusivity and I'm wondering how you feel about that. See, it's not blaming, it's not berating, it's not like mean. And if you're noticing that resistance, then I would just check in what a healthy partner actually is for you. And remember that you are likely seeking to be a secure partner with a secure partner. And a secure partner is able to hold these requests and hear you out and respond with love and communicate. So by addressing a boundary in this example, you are maintaining authenticity, you're reinforcing your own self-respect, and creating a relationship foundation that's going to feel secure and set you up for way more success long term. It's probably also going to make you feel like your desires matter when the person that you're relating to hears you and acknowledges that you have a need or desire. And that's going to help you heal all sorts of layers and stories around needs. Okay, and let me leave you with a strong one-liner, which is, if you're not asserting your boundaries, someone else is. If you're not asserting your boundaries, someone else is consciously or unconsciously creating your boundary. They will come in and push you around to their will, with or without realizing it. Life pushes you around. That's what happens when our boundaries are not asserted. So what do you need to do next in order to succeed in balancing your boundaries and feeling like your values and needs and boundaries are all aligned in this way that makes you feel empowered? It is learning your boundaries and needs, working to uncover the blocks that show up from them on a subconscious level. So there's a reason that we've had leaky boundaries or rigid boundaries thus far in life. They were kind of keeping you safe. They were a survival strategy. They're part of your subconscious defense system. And that's the part that we have to go in and do the healing work on and the soothing work on and the uncovering and the nervous system regulation around. We have to bring presence to these parts of ourselves to learn a different way of operating that is, as I said, on the nervous system level. And also learning how to communicate those boundaries. So those are kind of like the 3 steps. And if all this resonated, then we go much deeper in boundaries inside my Becoming Secure program. There's always a link in the description. And that is basically a 3-month program where we do nervous system regulation, somatic work, there's live calls, there's live workshops. You get actually supported, and you can do a lot in 3 months in terms of this topic. Like, imagine just committing to yourself, say 15 minutes, 4 times a week, and then feeling connected to who you are, feeling whole within yourself, feeling like you can communicate what you actually want, and starting to get what you actually want. That is the magic of healthy, beautiful boundaries. I just had 2 messages from women in that program in the last days where they said, like, they were telling me their wins, and they were like, I set a boundary, I asked for a need, and he immediately honored that and immediately changed his behavior. I set a boundary, and they were super responsive and supportive. Like, when we know how to do this, and when it comes from a place of I am allowed to have this need, I'm allowed to have this boundary, and it doesn't have all this charge around it, it becomes much easier. Much easier. But we have to do it on a nervous system level, and you watching YouTube video is nothing is happening on a nervous system level. So that's why we do somatic work in there. I will guide you into all of it. If you're like, what does that even mean? Don't worry, I've got you. Would love to meet you inside. Our next video is going to talk about the secret to feeling held and seen, especially for a woman who resonates with being strong and independent. So I'll see you there. Chat soon. Mwah.